Okay, we're going to have a new video today. We're doing an approval role for Intacct program approvers. It'll focus mostly on program approvers, but really the basics of all this can be applied to any of the other approvers. The agenda is we're going to talk about the program approver role, purchasing transaction approval history, purchasing approvals, the workflows requiring program approvals, how to mass or single approve and decline, and then approval notification requests. So when we talk about the program approver role, to the right here, we can see that it's a screenshot from where a program approver is set up in Intacct. We see the program ID, and so in this one's going to be finance, so our program ID is 123, the name of finance for the program, and the person that's been designated as manager for that program. And so in this case it's Jim White, and so any of the documents submitted through the purchasing workflows that require a program approver, it'll be him that's will be notified or required to approve at that level. And what we have over here is, and as you can see from the screenshot, Intacct has the ability to set one designated manager of a program. It has to be a person, it can't be a group of people or multiple people. So whenever we determine who the program manager is or the program approver, that's the person that will be approving. That person's then delegated the task of approving purchasing requests simply by being designated as the manager of a program. And when we go to the purchasing document, approvals, it'll show it as transaction department approval inside of that area. So we'll see that when we get to that point. This is the purchasing transaction approval history, just a screenshot of one of the stuff that's out there. And we can see approval step 1, transaction department approval. We can see the subject, subject manager, department manager, approver, the name of the person that's been designated as the approver for that program. If they've had a delegate, this is only available though for people with unrestricted access. So for program users, having a delegate won't be an option. You can see if they've approved it, their name fills in, the date they approved it, and then the state. And so for this, we can go through and see that this is a travel workflow. And the next step is value approval, which signifies the program monitor. And then after that, there's 3 other approvals, and that says user because we actually identify a specific person that it has to be. So as we look at the approval history of a purchasing record, the state field is going to actually tell us who it's sitting with. So we know that on this one, line number 1, it's approved, so that person's job is done. Line number 2 says submitted, and what submitted means is that's who it's been submitted to. So in this sample we're looking at, it's been submitted to the approver of line number 2, which says value approval, meaning the program monitor. And then the 3 people that follow suit for this, step 3, step 4, step 5, says pending approval, meaning it's pending their approval, hasn't reached their desk yet. So if we're looking at our purchasing records and we want to know who we're waiting on for approval, we're looking to see who it's been submitted to in this. And now we know. And we could reach out to that person if we felt it's been taking too long, or if we had a question about the document we submitted. This would be the person we would want to contact. Here's a list of the transactions that require program approver. Standard purchase requisition, travel requisition, travel request vendor payment, travel reconciliation, prepaid expense requisition, contract services requisition, and non-PO voucher. Any other purchasing transaction document that's submitted through Intacct will not include the program approver for any form of approval. So this will include vouchers, justifications, as a sample of what will not require a program approver. So let's get into purchasing transactions requiring transaction department approval. Here's that list. Now we'll just dig into it a little bit more. Standard purchase requisition. Here's the screenshot of what the approval rules have been set up to be in Intacct. Level 1 approver, the first approver. Transaction department approval, meaning the program manager. Level 2 value approval, meaning the program monitor. So when a purchase requisition is submitted, it first goes to step number 1, transaction department approval. Upon their approval, it becomes partially approved and is now waiting for the value approval. This workflow, meaning standard purchase requisition, it's used to initiate purchase requisitions and encumber program budgets in order to create a purchase order. Travel requests. There are 5 approvers. First approver is transaction department approval, the program manager. And as you'll see as we go through these workflows, the program manager is the first approver of any of these requests. So this request is utilized to initiate requests for advance of travel funds for employees. So it will go through the program manager, program monitor, travel monitor, finance manager, and the president, in this case vice president's been delegated. Travel request for vendor payments has the exact same workflow. And this workflow is used to initiate requests for travel advances for employee travel, where a vendor is the recipient of the advanced funds. This may include, but it's not limited to, things such as airline tickets, hotel costs, and registration fees. So pretty much if we're traveling and part of our travel costs are to pay somebody other than the employee that's traveling, this is the workflow we would use. This is the approval workflow that's followed. Travel reconciliation. This workflow is utilized once an employee trip is completed. This document will be created by the program and will summarize the actual expenses incurred, plus include supporting documentation. So when fully approved, the difference of the reconciliation and the travel request determines the balance that will be owed by the individual if the reconciliation is less than the advance, the balance that could be owed to the person if the reconciliation exceeds the advance, or if they're equal, then no balance would be due. It'd just be a zero balance, and that would be the end of the travel or the end of the trip. So we can see that this is a 3-step approval, starting with the program director, next with the travel monitor, and then finally the program monitor. Okay, so for prepaid expenses, there may come a time where situations call for issuing a check prior to the receipt of goods or services. This might include postage and product where purchase orders are not accepted. There's a 4-step approval process, starting with the program manager, the CFO, the program monitor, and then finally the finance manager. We also have contract service requisitions. This workflow is used when a program engages a business to perform certain services where a contract is necessary to stipulate those arrangements, including the type of work, the cost, and the rights of each party. Especially when we engage individuals who are not employees of the tribe. So if we're engaging a company to remodel an office, provide mental health services, that type of stuff goes through contract services requisition. It is a 5-step approval, starting with the program manager, the program monitor, CFO, treasurer, and then the president or his delegate, the vice president. And these are the people that will approve contracts. And then finally, the last workflow that requires approval by the program director. This is the non-PO voucher workflow. And this workflow is used to pay for services specifically authorized in the accounting manual where purchase orders are not required. This includes things like counsel donations and medical assistance. This is a 3-step approval process, starting with the program manager, the program monitor, and then finally the finance manager. So in these workflows, the program manager is the first person to approve all these documents. Something to keep in mind, and these are the only ones that require the program manager. In the workflows we've just gone through, where we see the finance manager, Lynette's name, this person's included because these are requests that directly become checks when approved. So like this non-PO voucher, upon her approval, a bill is sent to accounts payable to be paid. And so when Lynette's there, she's making sure there's actually funds available to authorize the request. Okay, so next we're going to talk about purchasing approvals. Navigating to approving transactions can be done by going to click on the application switcher, find purchasing and click on purchasing, and then under the other transaction activity menu, click on approved transaction, where then you'll be taken to a list view of purchasing transactions requiring your approval. No other types of documents would be viewed there, only the stuff that's waiting for your approval. So let's jump into Intacct. And we're going to come up here to the top. We're going to go to Purchasing. Under Other Transaction Activity, click on Approved Transactions. So depending on your access, of course, your list will probably look a lot different than this. These are the things currently waiting approval by pretty much anybody. But yours is going to have what's waiting for your approval of those other documents we've just reviewed. If we come to this area and we're expecting to see documents for approval and we don't see them, the first thing you should do before you do anything else is underneath Approved Transactions, you can see where I have All currently selected. Make sure it says All. Sometimes it may switch to Recently Viewed or Recently Modified. And when we do, it will have a blank list. Most common thing when I get a phone call from a program manager saying they can't see this stuff they're supposed to approve, this is reason number 1. Make sure All is selected. Reason number 2 is we're expecting to see a document that requires our approval when it doesn't. Documents like vouchers, documents like justifications do not require a program manager approval. So if those things are submitted, don't expect to see them in your approved transactions list. You can also get there through your email whenever you get a notification if you have that on. So now we want to approve or decline something from the purchasing transaction list. You can approve one at a time or through a group of transactions. So as we see a giant list of stuff here, if we wanted to approve one at a time, it's as easy as just clicking on this Approve button. When you click Approve for one transaction, or even on Decline for one transaction, you'll be given an opportunity to make a brief comment about why you approved it or why you're declining it, so that the people involved in the approval workflow will see that, especially the person that if you choose to decline it, they'll get a message why you're declining the document. If you want to see the contents of the document, all you have to do is click on the blue View button, and it'll take you to the actual voucher prepared by your employee. And now we can start going through and seeing who the vendor is, any references that we need to be aware of, ticket numbers. We can open up our attachments, whatever we feel is needed to make a decision before we approve. We can look at the history of the document. We can see when this started, so we know this started back in August, on August 13th. It became a purchase order on August 13th, and within 3 days we have a voucher prepared and ready to pay. So a pretty speedy, efficient process for this purchase order. And once you're ready, You don't have to go back out to your list. Right up on the top we have the approve and decline buttons. Make a decision here. You can click approve or decline, whichever you would be doing based on your review. So I'm just going to click done to take us back out to the purchasing list. Once we've reviewed our list of documents we want to approve, up in the top we have a select button. When you click that, it'll select all of the purchasing transactions waiting your approval that's on the page. So my page, I have set in my preferences to show 999 lines of activity. Many of you, if you haven't switched it from the default, it's 20. So if you had more than 20 things waiting your approval, when we click select, it's only going to choose the 20 on the page that you can see. So you can select this and have all of these, and then up top here are approve and decline buttons. And when I click one of those, all of the documents that have the checkbox will then be approved or declined. It's a fast way to approve and decline, but the only thing is, one, you can't leave a comment. So if you were declining a lot of transactions, you wouldn't be able to communicate that to somebody through the system. And two, if we get into that habit, we might stop reviewing these requests and just quickly approve. So just make sure we're viewing everything first before we decide to approve. Okay, so that would be the approval process. That's how you approve either a single one or mass approve a group of them. In the approval process, something called Spend Insight comes into play. It verifies the request during the submitting and final approval steps. So during step 1 and whatever final step there is. So like in the contract approval, there's 5. So at level 1 and level 5, Spend Insight comes into play. Has to be kept in mind when you're approving stuff. The budget is verified when a user submits a purchase transaction. In other words, the system will verify, does the line item for your funding source have the funds available to accommodate the request. When they submit it to you, the budget is not affected, so it is unchanged. In other words, you would be able to submit multiple requests regardless of whatever the budget result would be after things are approved. And since the budget's not affected until the request is fully approved, you can have multiple documents come through to you where you might not have the funds available. But by putting your trust into Spend Insight, which only verifies the existing budget, you want to be very careful there. It happens a lot on travel, where we'll have multiple requests sent that meet the budget criteria until one of them gets approved, and then that causes the budget to change. And so then the rest of them, as they reach the final approver, their action posts the encumbrance to the budget, so the final approval won't be able to approve the one or more of those documents because a prior one that was submitted has now affected the budget. Just something to keep in mind, especially with your staff. Stuff that we should always be checking and know of before it reaches that final person, because that can be pretty frustrating for that person, because now you'll need a budget mod. And when it comes to travel, we generally wait till the last minute to do our stuff. So now you're being told on a Friday that your travel for Monday can't be approved without a budget mod. So keep this in mind. You could use a Cuff account, or just figure that out before you submit this stuff, that your $800 request will exceed your $1,000 budget. So for purchasing approval notifications, what we're talking about is your user preferences. So for everyone who's logged into Intacct, you find your name up in the right corner. Click on your name, click on My Preferences. And what that's going to do is that's going to take you to your personal preferences. And so when we scroll down to the area where there's email notifications and requests for approval, we can check or uncheck purchasing to say if it's checked when you're the program manager and a purchasing request goes for your approval, you'll be notified by email. Right? Obviously, the best solution, especially for if you're away from your computer, you can have your email sent to your phone so that you can be told when something is waiting your approval, and it doesn't have to take any more time than necessary, or somebody doesn't have to track you down. So it's a good option just to be aware of what's happening in your program, and you won't have to feel like you're constantly having to check Intacct to see if stuff is submitted, or to have an employee tell you that they submitted something. You can set a minimum amount. So if you only want to be told when it exceeds a certain dollar amount, you can do that too. But at that point, if you're already asking to be notified for purchasing, you just as well have all levels tell you. So make sure that's checked, and then click Save. So once you've done that, you can now start being told that you have something requiring your approval, and you can go through these processes that we've followed, where you can view your purchasing document for approval, make sure it has the stuff that it's supposed to have, make sure if you've received a bunch of requests at once for the same line item of fund, double check that the amounts aren't going to exceed the existing budget before you send them through, just to avoid any hassle or delay in getting a check out. Make sure all the supporting documents that are needed are attached, and then approve and send that forward to the next person in the step. If you're ever unsure, when we go to purchasing, we go to Approve Transactions again, and let's view one of these documents. When we go to History tab, and right here it's pretty nondescript, so it's hard to see, but there's a blue approval history. When we click on that, that tells us the approving history of this document. So we know the one we're currently looking at was recently submitted. It's waiting for the program monitor to approve, and it's pending the approval of the next person, the finance manager, Lynette, and it is a voucher. So we know with her name attached, that means upon her approval, it goes to accounts payable for a check. So at any point, we can check the status, see what these things are. Whatever line it says submitted, that's who we're waiting for approval. So we don't have to call and ask Lynette and tell her, hey, this thing's waiting for your approval, because there's nothing she can do about it until the person before her takes care of the business first. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Otherwise, have a good day.